Hey everyone, Corey from Aquarium Co-op. Today we're talking top 5 selling invertebrates, so shrimp and snails. You might wonder, do these actually sell? Maybe what should I breed to sell to a store? What are other stores selling? Here you go. So our number one selling thing, I don't think it's a big shocker to anybody, but cherry shrimp. We sell them by the ton almost. I think it's because they can go with everything. They look good on plants. And when I say go with everything, obviously not Oscars and things, but all the typical fare of like most tetras, all the nanofish, lots of little corridoras, plecos, they just kind of mesh in, and people know they're relatively easy to breed. Not everybody has success, but in general, if you provide a lot of cover, don't provide too many predators, you'll make more, and then you populate most tanks. I have neocardinia shrimp and mostly cherries in almost every single aquarium here in my fish room. So definitely been loved for many years. In fact, it was one of the first things I ever sold to other hobbyists way back before I owned a store. And so they've been a passion of mine and for most people for a long time now. Next up, a mono shrimp. Now, polar opposite. You can't even breed those unless you're really getting into the brackish water, but they're sold so much because people have algae problems, and maybe you do have a nano tank and you can't put big plecos, like a big old bristlenose in there or something. And in general, they do work on algae. In fact, I've got 15 of them in here. We just added last week to work on some of the algae, and they work in addition to the other things. You might have autosynclus and maybe a bushy nose in there and other things, but they get sold in mass because almost everybody has an algae problem, whether you have arowanas and Oscars, or you have nanofish, or you've got lybears. In general, you can get algae from time to time. We all get busy, and that's why they're one of the top selling things out of the store. Next up, blue velvet shrimp. So a blue version of the reds. It's not uncommon for people to get a little bit of breeding action with the reds and go, wow, this is really cool. I want to try a different color. And they are the same thing, just a different color form. And so the blues offset the red. They look good even in the same tank. You might hear of Skittle mixes and things like that. And they go well with nanofish. And what does that mean? Well, a lot of the nanofish tend to be red. The Brigitae or Chili rasboras, the Ember tetras, the Phoenix rasboras, the exclamation point rasboras are a little more orange. That blue pops against them, where a red cherry shrimp with more red is just a lot of red. And so the blue is a great go-to, especially when someone comes into the store and is like, well, I already have cherry shrimp. I'm looking for a kind of a little cleanup crew. And it's like, what about a different color shrimp? And then that kind of works out because they've had success with that before. So blue velvet's also very high up on that list. Next, mystery snails. I don't think we would assume this. So they're a bigger snail, and depending on who's working in the store, if we love mystery snails, we sell a lot of mystery snails. If we don't, we don't. I think the lure of them is you can kind of control their population in that they crawl up out of the tank, they lay their cluster of eggs, and you could remove those if you wanted. Where other types of snails, a lot of times, they'll just keep reproducing, like the ram's horns and the Malaysian trumpet snails. And those are good for like feeding puffers, but not so much if you just want to keep it in your tank all the time. And so having something that you can distinctly, kind of name, like there's Gary right there. And they get big, maybe up to like golf ball size, and they're just kind of a little bit personable, and they're plant safe, and there's a lot of perks to them. Obviously you got to give them some minerals like some easy shrimp and snail, and keep them fed. They're not just, I should mention all of these, they're not just cleanup crew. They do need to be fed, and you treat them as a pet, and they're not purely to do the things they will do in addition, like breeding and eating algae. They will do that, but they still need dedicated food and to be protected. You don't want to keep them with loaches, for instance. They would eat snails for the most part, or puffers, like we already mentioned. And so, yeah, this big old snail for, like $5 is a solid addition to most people that walk into the store going, well, I don't have a big old golf ball snail in my tank yet. That would be fun to add. I could use a little bit more of a cleanup. I'm already maybe putting in easy shrimp and snail for the shrimp I already have. And the good news is, basically, almost all snails are friendly with shrimp. So if you already have shrimp, they go hand in hand, and they're just not really problematic. And so that's, I think, why the mystery snail is so drawn to, compared to all the other snails people could be buying. Now, the last, number 5, Nitrite snails. So again, another type of snail, and we don't separate out the Nitrite snail. So there's a bunch of different Nitrite snails, right? And people will pick and choose, but for the most part, they all replicate the same way, where they're going to lay these little white crusty eggs, and if you have brackish water, they hatch out, and you could raise them, which no one does. But being that you can, again, control the population, and they happen to be really good algae eaters. They will eat that green spot algae on the glass, so that like almost nothing else does that. So that's a big perk that they've got. They look really cool on average, and they're under $5. And then there's another like secret, hidden layer unlock that most people don't know, and that is that they will eat blue-green cyanobacteria. So if you've ever had that, or if you look it up, you go, oh, that stuff. They will eat that. And so you have people, I have never run into it, like, well, if you're keeping Nitrite snails, they'll eat it. And then if you have it in your tanks and you've been battling it, and maybe the meds aren't getting it, or you don't want to use meds, adding Nitrite snails, in our experience, they will chow down on it. Now, I don't know if they can fully eradicate it because the snail can't get into every nook and cranny, but we find that if you keep a reasonable amount of Nitrite snails in the tank, you will just not see any cyanobacteria. So, obviously I can't just put one in this 150 gallon and be like, great, don't have to worry about it anymore. There's not a specific ratio, but I would say like 1 to every 10 to 30 gallons. Like, obviously if this tank was completely covered, I would use more. But if it's like, oh, I'm just kind of preventative and all of that, I would use less. Also know that each one that you do have will be kind of laying eggs, and, obviously depending on the sex that you get, but there's trade-offs. You got to feed them, there's all these trade-offs. So, but they live with everything else. And that's what's nice is I think people buy lots of invertebrates because most of them can just commingle and you're feeding them all the same thing anyway. And so that's the top 5 out of our store. Most of those you can breed if you really wanted to. There's some that are super easy, some that are more difficult. And, yeah, so now when you're going in, you're not the crazy person looking for that. Everybody's kind of looking for that.